2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks, we actually read the first part of this parsha, because that was Parsha Shekalim. We talked about the machzis hashekel, the half shekel. And if you recall, I don't want to repeat everything, that the thing we mentioned about the half shekel is that this went to the korbanos, this went to the offering, and the notion of uniformity, rich and poor are equal, is the notion that no matter what your talents are, as long as you do the best with what God gave you, you stand before God with equality of dignity and respect and worthiness. But I did mention that paradoxically, the machzis hashekel that is being addressed in this parsha is not the annual half shekel that was given for korbanos. Rather, this is a one-time half shekel of silver that was melted down, and it was used for the sockets that held the boards in place. Okay, so there are two different machzis hashekels that are involved here. There is the annual machzis hashekel that funded the operating budget of the Beis HaMikdash or the Mishkan, used for korbanos. And then there's the one-time machzis hashekel that is the adanim, the sockets, right? If you remember that each board had two prongs like a socket, and they were inserted into these heavy silver blocks, and that held it up. And when the Mishkan was disassembled, the krashim, the boards, were taken out of the adanim. So here, there's really an alternative message to what the adanim represent. And that is, there's a Gemara at the end of Maseches Makos that makes a very interesting point. It says, God gave Moshe 613 commandments. But the later generations were unable to kind of keep 613 things in their mind. Too complicated. So the different generations tried to encapsulate these principles in a fewer number of things. And the Gemara goes through, David HaMelech did it with 15, and someone else did it with 11. Okay? So it goes down all the way, because as the generations get spiritually weaker, there's fewer and fewer things they can really remember. So finally, we get down to as low as you can go. And that is, well, before we get to the bottom, which is 1, obviously, negative numbers don't work here, it mentions 3. The Navi Micha gave 3 principles, which are very, very beautiful, a very famous verse. Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach. What does God ask of you? Ki'im asos mishpat, to do justice. Avas chesed, to love kindness. V'hatznei aleches, im Hashem Elokecha, and to walk humbly with your God. Right, these are 3 beautiful principles of Micha. Do justice, love kindness, and walk with humility. Yeshayahu got it down to 2. Shimru mishpat, do justice or keep justice. Asu tzedakah, and give tzedakah. Now, this roughly corresponds to chesed, but you'll notice that Yeshayahu left out walking humbly with your God. Why would that be? Why did he leave that out? So some want to suggest that the midah of tznius, which is not at all limited to women's dress, that's a total distortion, but tznius is a certain modesty and humility in how you relate to God. When you do mitzvos, you do them privately. You don't do them publicly. You don't do them with ostentation. But maybe there's a suggestion that when a generation gets spiritually weaker, people have to go out of their way to do mitzvahs so their children should see. In other words, there is a time in which you're not supposed to be overly modest, because you need to be a role model and an inspiration. I tell you, I knew a person, this is quite an unusual thing, whose father, I didn't know his father, but his father was apparently a very learned person, a very righteous person. But his father was so humble, he never wanted even his family to see him serving Hashem. So he would only learn Torah when the children were asleep or not in the house. When they were in the house, he never learned Torah. Now, what happened basically was his children grew up and didn't become people who learned Torah because they didn't see it. So sometimes a parent has to be a bit of a show-off, meaning to say you have to yield your modesty a little bit in order to inspire and to show people the good, right? Because if you're overly humble, it can sometimes turn into the notion that people never learn from you, and you're not a force for good in that way. That's why Yeshayahu left out the Hatznei Alechas, not because, God forbid, it's not important. Of course it's important. But he's merames, there are times in which you need to not be so sanua in that way. So we went from 3 to 2. But then we get to Habakkuk. Habakkuk is one of the 12 prophets. We call them the minor prophets, but that's crazy. They're not minor prophets. Their books are small, so they're called Treyasar. And Habakkuk says, 2 things are too much. They used to say about President Gerald Ford, he can't walk and chew gum at the same time. 2 things, too difficult. He came up with 1 thing, and that is tzaddik bi'amunaso yichya. The righteous person lives by emunah. The one quality that is the foundation of everything is my faith that Hashem loves me and Hashem cares about me and Hashem runs the world and runs my life. And when you have emunah, there are many, many gifts that you have. You have resilience, you have hope, you have optimism, you have courage, you have a desire to serve Hashem because you know that He's there for you. And therefore, from emunah, you will come to everything else. Because emunah both gives you hope and it gives you incentive. And therefore, emunah is the one principle that underlies everything. So now, when we come to the Mishkan, and here you'll have to take this on faith. In fact, I even have to take it on faith. I didn't count it. Rabbeinu Bechaya says there are actually 613 details in the construction of the Mishkan. And every single detail corresponds to a particular mitzvah. That's the Mishkan. And here's the thing. When it comes to every other part of the Mishkan, other than the sockets, everybody gave whatever they wanted to give. Some people gave gold, some people gave silver, some people gave wool. Because when you build a Mishkan, you build a Mishkan with your uniqueness, your identity. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But the only part of the Mishkan which everybody gave the same are the sockets. Because the sockets represent the commonality of foundation. And what is the commonality of foundation? Habakkuk says Amunah. And therefore, everybody builds the Mishkan in their own creative way. No uniformity. But it must rest on the common foundation of the Adonim, which is Emunah, Tzaddik, B'Emunah So Yichya. So now, here's an interesting point. There are 2 Adonim per Keresh. And that teaches us Emunah is a double-pronged thing. There must be Emunah in God, and there must be emunah in yourself. That's why the Adonim, which is emunah, are 2. Rav Tzadok writes, indeed, this is exactly Rav Tzadok's very, very famous lashon. Kishem shechayev adam lahamin ba'kadosh baruch hu. Just as a person must believe in Hashem, kach chayev lahamin bi'atzmo. He must believe in himself. You must believe that you're worthy to be connected to God. You must believe that God gave you talents, abilities, that there's much that you can give to the world, much that you contribute, and that is why the Adonim is the foundation. And in that foundation, we have 2 Adonim. And why are the Adonim made from the half-shekel? Half-shekel? So here, because the nature of emunah means we have to tell ourselves we only understand half of the story. Because the big challenges to emunah generally is there is so much in the world that appears to be inexplicable. The problem of evil, the problem of suffering, the book of Iyov. And this can greatly, greatly, greatly challenge a person's emunah. But connecting emunah to the half-shekel reminds a person, I only understand half. So the two prongs, okay, the uniformity, everyone gives the same. That reminds me that although everybody builds a mishkan in their own way, but the foundation must be common, emunah. The two prongs, because emunah is both in God and in me, and the half is emunah recognizes the limitations of human knowledge. You know, I read this a little bit connected. It was very, very beautiful stories. I wanted to share it with you, and I'll end here. That on the Chabad website, they have the story of Viktor Frankl, the famous Viktor Frankl. That Viktor Frankl spent his last years in Vienna, actually many, many years in Vienna, and he would send money to the Chabad there every year, even though he was not a practicing, well, he was married to a Catholic woman, and he seemed not to have been a practicing Jew. Although it was discovered afterwards, he put on tefillin every day in private. But okay, and the story goes, somebody asked him, like, why do you give to Chabad? You know, you don't identify as a Jew, you don't go to shul, you don't do any of these things. So he said that after the war, he had gone out of the concentration camps, and Frankl was teaching logotherapy, man's search for meaning. And, you know, we have no control over what happens to us, you know, all of those beautiful themes. But our only mission in life is to make the choice. And he says he was really mocked by conventional psychotherapists who were Freudians, particularly in Vienna. And they basically said, you know, man is simply a product of his biological urges and his neuroses. And what you're talking about is simply Baba Mises or made-up things. Fits for sermons, which is the lowest form of rabbinic sermons, the lowest form of teaching. So he said that Lubavitcher Rebbe had met with a woman from Vienna, and he just said to the woman, hey, when you go to Vienna, just go to Dr. Frankl, look him up. The Rebbe never met Dr. Frankl. And just tell him these words. Keep on working. Keep on teaching. Don't give up hope. Believe that you have something worthwhile to say. And eventually the world is going to appreciate. Now, the Rebbe had never met Frankl, and Frankl didn't even publish anything yet. But somehow the Rebbe, as he always knew, kind of knew what was going on. And Frankl, says, the woman rang his doorbell. The woman tells him, I have a message from a rabbi in New York. This is what he said. And Frankl burst out crying, he said. He started crying. He said, I was just about ready to give up. I was just about ready to stop teaching this, stop doing this. Nobody was listening. Nobody was paying attention. And here I get a message from a rabbi in New York that I have to have faith in what I'm doing, that it's something good and something that will help people. He says, and that was the message I needed to hear. So, paradoxically, the very person who teaches the importance of making that decision needed to have chizuk, that the decision he was making was something that was worthwhile and important. And actually it's a quite beautiful story that Viktor Frankl got his chizuk from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and therefore, although he stayed married to a non-Jewish woman, etc., and was actually a very, very good person in many, many ways, very special person. It's always a bit of a problem when you're confronted with that situation. But as I say, he never openly did any mitzvot, but privately he davened every day, and he put on tefillin every day. In fact, his son-in-law once said he once walked into a room and he saw his father-in-law wearing tefillin, and his father-in-law was very, very upset that his privacy was interrupted that way. But you never know. You never know. So be it as it may, this is the remez of emunah in the Adonim, and God willing, we should all be zocha to build that foundation. And a house is only as strong as its foundation. And the stronger we have this yesod of emunah, the greater will the success in our life be, and the greater will our connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu be. So have a good week.